Well, Paul Bremer was the presidential envoy to Iraq after the US-led invasion in 2003. He joins us now from our Washington studio. Good evening to you. First of all, a response, please, to what President Obama has now said. President Obama has said it's up to the Iraqi government to sort this out. We don't appear to have a proper Iraqi government. Should the US be doing more?
You know, I think, first of all, the president needs to be congratulated for making a tough decision to re-engage in Iraq last week. It was not easy. My concern is that the steps that have been announced so far, it seems to me, are not commensurate with the objectives, the three objectives that he has stated.
Well, you have said that no boots on the ground is quite different from combat forces. What do you mean by that, and what would you like to see going in? We know there's special ops in, and we know we've got airstrikes. So tell me, what do you want to see?
Well, I think there are three areas we need to operate in. First of all, assist the Kurds. It sounds now finally that we have started giving them some weapons. They will need stepped up intelligence. They may need some assistance in planning special operations. Sooner or later, the issue is not going to be air power. It's going to be retaking cities, which is going to involve special operations.
And it's going to, do you mean by that you will actually mean that there will be hundreds of special American troops on the ground, or thousands?
There are already hundreds there. I've read 800. I'm not aware of the exact number. It's more a question of planning than actually carrying out operations. Second thing we need to do, once the government is resolved, and I think it actually will be resolved, once the government's resolved, we need to help the Iraqi government reconstitute the Iraqi army. Al-Maliki's most serious mistake that he made was basically purging that army of trained officers trained by our army back in 2006 and 2007. So we've got to help them reconstitute. And finally, this is the area where I think the president's policy needs the most evolution. He stated in an interview with the New York Times over the weekend that we would not allow the establishment of an Islamic caliphate in Iraq and Syria. Well, in fact, they've already established it. At least they've announced it. And that is an American interest to stop that. It's not just a problem for the Iraqis. It is, as he said tonight, something the Iraqi government needs to be concerned about. But we need to be concerned about it.
So the establishment of that is essentially a failure of American foreign policy?
Well, by the president's own definition, he said we would not allow it, and now it's happened. So the question is, what do we do now? And it seems to me that sooner or later, the president is going to have to consider broadening the air campaign against ISIS, against these Islamic extremists in Iraq and perhaps even in Syria.
Now, let me take you right back then to Nouri al-Maliki. Basically, Nouri al-Maliki is, as he believes it, still the prime minister, but at the time when he first came to power, he was backed by the US, he was lauded by George W. Bush. That has proved to be a huge mistake, hasn't it?
I think al-Maliki has certainly made a real mess of a lot of things, in particular what he did with the well-trained American-trained army, which collapsed, as we all saw, in the north as soon as they faced these
But he was divisive.
Paul
Bremer, he was divisive from the start, wasn't he? He wasn't inclusive of the Sunnis. And that was a failure of understanding by the Americans as to his character.
Well, yes, and also it was a factor that we exacerbated by the withdrawal of American troops. It was the day after President Obama told him we were going to have no troops at the end of 2011, the very next day in Baghdad, that al-Maliki issued an arrest warrant for his Sunni vice president. As you pointed out, he has been hostile to the Sunnis, and that's been a very serious mistake.
But you have talked, it's interesting because you've talked about al-Maliki's failure to make the most of American-trained forces and the removal of the cadre, the officer cadre. Right back, wasn't one of the problems was the policy that you, among others, instituted, which was the de-Baathification and also the purging of the armed forces way back at the beginning, the de-Baathification of the Sunnis and the purging of the armed forces. If they had been left in place, do you think Iraq would be in such a precarious situation?
I don't think it materially affected the situation. Basically, what we did was build a new Iraqi army, which is the Iraqi army that defeated al-Qaeda by the end of 2009. Al-Qaeda was defeated by the Iraqi army.
And then in Mosul,
an army trained by the American army.
And then in Mosul,
they collapsed
they melted
in Mosul.
Away, in front of the IS.
Yes, but they melted away because they were commanded by al-Maliki's Shia cronies who were put in there. Anybody who knows anything about the military knows that if you've got an officer leading your platoon whom you don't trust, you're not going to fight for him. And that's exactly what happened. They collapsed. Those 4 divisions collapsed up there because the prime minister had put in untrained, in most cases not trained at all, Shia who were loyal to him. You are quite right when you said he has pursued a sectarian political policy. That is absolutely right.
But was he not? Did he not get the tone of that? Did he? Sorry to interrupt, but was he not, in a sense, set on that path or given almost free rein to do that? By the fact that after the invasion, there was this purging, there was the de-Baathification, there was the removal by the American incoming forces of the Sunnis. If they'd been left in place, surely we wouldn't have been in this position.
If they'd been left in place, we'd have Saddam there still.
No, you could remove Saddam
both we and the Iraqis would be a lot worse off. Now, the sectarian
But it's a separate issue, isn't it?
Excuse me.
It's a separate issue.
No.
It's a separate issue. You remove Saddam, you didn't have to move the whole group of Sunnis who were in power.
It's not a separate issue. Look, we can relitigate all that if you want. We are where we are. I agree that al-Maliki has pursued a sharply sectarian policy, one that he accelerated when he learned that we were going to have no troops there anymore at the end of 2011. And I hope that he will now find a way to disengage from this standoff that your reporter talked about earlier that's going on in Baghdad tonight, and that we will see a new prime minister put together a new government that we can then help reconstitute this army.
But if those troops on the street are at al-Maliki's behest, and if there is trouble, you heard what experts said in the package, that this will be a disaster for Iraq. If there is a meltdown in Baghdad, Iraq essentially will break up.
Well, I agree that if those troops wind up fighting to keep al-Maliki in place, then we are in a new ballgame entirely. I'm not yet confident that that's the direction it's going to go, but there is certainly a risk, and the risk is very great if it goes that direction. There's no question.
And in terms of the incoming Prime Minister, who you know from a previous incarnation, have you any evidence that he would be more inclusive? I mean, that you're betting the house on that, but is there any actual evidence that he would be?
Well, I don't think we're betting the house. I think the Iraqis are betting the house, although the Vice President has congratulated him. Look, he was a Minister of Communication in the very first interim government. He showed some courage there by proceeding to open the country for the first time to cell phone usage. There are now 23 million Iraqis who have cell phones. I had a lot of dealings with him, but I don't have a judgment as to how he'll perform as Prime Minister because I haven't seen him for 10 years. He's been in a higher position since then as Deputy Speaker. He comes from the same wing of the Dawa party as Ibrahim Jafari, who was the first Prime Minister. Hard to say.
He said in an interview in the Huffington Post in June, and maybe it was just to twist the arm of the Americans, that he would take assistance from anyone for helping to deal with IS, including the Iranians. You, of course, had urged the Americans to move faster in combating IS. But the thing is that if people like him feel the Americans are not doing enough, what is to stop him turning to the Iranians?
Well, the Iranians, obviously, it's a complicated situation for them, too. They certainly have, one has to say, been strengthened in the last 10 years in their position in Iraq. There are reports that the Iranians also have told al-Maliki it's time to move on. I don't know if that's true. It is certainly true that Grand Ayatollah Sistani very publicly has called for a more inclusive government. He doesn't represent the Iranians, obviously, but there is a lot of pressure on the Shia side for al-Maliki to move aside.
But one final question, though. Surely, if you have got IS supposedly beheading people, burying them alive, crucifying people, abducting 300 women, if that's not casus belli, what is? And if you didn't go into Syria, is there any chance you're going to help sort this out?
Well, if I were advising the administration, as I said earlier, I would now call for a broader military air campaign against the jihadists, not just because it's in Iraq's interest, but because it's in America's interest.
Thank you very much,
We saw
Paul
the
Bremer.
problem when Taliban took over Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Paul Bremer.